Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Tes Vav Amud Aleph, 15a of Maseches Megillah, very top of the page, and the Gemara is continuing in the Agadic discussions of the Megillah and other things, and currently we are discussing a Brisa that appeared on Yudal Rama Beis, 14b, about 6 lines up, and the Brisa said that there were 8 Nevi'im who were Kohanim, who came from Rachav Hazona, who were descendants of Rachav, and they listed them up. It was Neriah and Baruch, Saria, Mechasya, Yirmiyah, Chilkiah, Chanamel, and Shalom. Now, of those 8, so a number of them are father-son pairs, and amongst them, for example, like it says Neriah and Baruch. Well, Baruch was the son of Neriah, and it has Saria and Mechasya. Mechasya was the son of Saria. So the Gemara here at the top, it asks, Bishlama inhu mefarshi. So I understand they themselves, meaning the sons, we find explicitly that they were Nevi'im. Ela av hasayu minalan. But how do we know that their fathers were Nevi'im? So, for example, as Rashi elaborates, they're not all explicit, but, for example, so Chanamel, it says, that he had a Dvar Hashem, so Chanamel is pretty explicit. Baruch and Saria, so they were the students of Yirmiyah, and we find in various places. And says Rashi, so it's common that the students of a Navi are Nevi'im themselves, or prophets themselves. So it makes sense that Baruch and Saria were Nevi'im. But what about Baruch's father Neriah and Saria's father Mechasya? Where do we find that they were Nevi'im? So the Gemara answers, Kita Ula, it's like the teaching of Ula, Da Amar Ula, Kol Makom Sheshmo V'Shem Aviv Ben Nevius, V'Yadua Shu Navi Ben Navi. Whenever you find the name of a person, of a prophet, and his father, so it says, for example, Baruch Ben Neriah, so you know that not only was he a Navi, but his father was a Navi. Meaning, if it's describing a Navi and it's telling you his father's name, it's telling you that his father was also a Navi. But Navi, Shmo v'lo Shem Aviv, but if it just says his name, it doesn't say his father's name. Yadua shu Navi v'lo ben Navi. Saying, he was a Navi, but he was not the son of a Navi, his father was not a Navi. So in this case, where it mentions their father's name, so we know that their fathers were also Nevi'im, and that's why they make this list. Shmo v'Shem Yiro. Now the statement of Ula continues, and it says, if it says his name and the name of his city, Mefurash, if it says what city he came from, Yadua Shumei Osayir, then he was from that city, which makes sense, pretty obvious. But it's coming to tell me that the following, Shemo v'lo Shemir, but if it says his name, but it doesn't say what city he was from, Yadua Shumei Yerushalayim. So then, he was from Yerushalayim. That's what we will assume, at least when it comes to Nevi'im, that if we don't know what city they came from, we are to assume they came from, if it doesn't say what city they came from, we are to assume they came from Yerushalayim. B'masni satar, it was talking a brisa. Kol shem, so this is kind of expounding on what we just said. Kol shem maisav stumin, umaisav osav stumin. Anybody who he and his father's deeds are stumin, it doesn't say much about who they were, what they did, were they good, were they not. But then you find one example where either the father or the son who did something praiseworthy. Kigon, for example, the following pasuk in Tzefania, it says Dvar Hashem Asher Haya El Tzefania Ben Kushi Ben Gedalia Ben Amaria Ben Chizkiah. It has a whole list. So we don't know much about these people, but we find, I guess, that one of them had a prophecy, Tzefania. So then, Yadua Shu Tzadik Ben Tzadik. So then you know that he's a Tzadik, the son of a Tzadik. Because it doesn't tell us anything about them except for one thing, which is something that indicates that he was a tzaddik, and So we don't know about his ancestry, but the assumption is if he's being mentioned with that ancestry that they were tzaddikim themselves. Now if all we have about someone is ginai, something negative, so then biyadua shu tzaddik ben, kagon, v'hi b'chodesh shvi ba yishma ben Nesanya ben Elishama. So for example, when Yishmael ben Nesanya came and he assassinated Gedaliah ben Achikam, so that's all we really know about him. And it says he was the son of Nesanya, the son of Elishama. So then biyadua shu Rasha ben Rasha. So then you know that not only was he Rasha, but his father and his grandfather were Rashayim too. If it's mentioning their names in association with him, it's telling us his lineage, and this is all we know about them. There's no other reports, no other psukim, nothing that tells us anything else about them. Then, since the only context we have is an act of evil, so then it must be, we can understand that they were also Rishayim, they were also wicked. Okay. Getting back to the list of Nevi'im, Amar of Nachman, Malachi ze Mordechai. You should know that the Navi Malachi, who gets his own book in Treyasar, in the 12 short books, the Navi Malachi, he was actually Mordechai, the same person. V'lama nikra shmo Malachi, so then why does it call him Malachi? Shahaya Mishnah Lamelch, because he became second to the king, right? Mordechai was appointed second to the king after Haman's demise, and so within his name, Malachi, Malach is usually like an agent, a messenger, but I guess within that we have the word Melech. Either he was the agent of the king, or the word Melech in there, he was like related to the king. So therefore Mordechai gets called Malachi. Meisvei, but we have a question, a contradiction on this from a Brisa. The Brisa says, Baruch ben Neriah, Visarya ben Machasya, it should say, V'Daniel, Mordechai, Bilshan v'Chagei Zachariah Malachi, Kulan Nistama b'Shatna Shtayim Daryavish. They all had prophecies in the second year of Daryavish II. Now, on that list, you have Mordechai and you have Malachi. So, and it says that all these people prophesying in that year. So, it can't be that Mordechai and Malachi are the same person, because they're listed separately on this list. So the Gemara says Tiyufta. That is a refutation of Rav Nachman's suggestion that they were the same person. Tanya, we're learning a brisa. Amar Bishua ben Karcha, Malachi ze Ezra. Bishua ben Karcha says that Malachi was not Mordechai, he was Ezra. The Chachamim are Malachi Shmo. Chachamim say no. You don't need to tell us. He was Malachi. That's who he was. He wasn't the same person as any other famous biblical character, biblical personage. He was his own. He was Malachi. Rav Nachman says, and there's questions about the Girsa here, because here we have Rav Nachman coming back. So earlier, when we had Rav Nachman saying Malachi is Mordechai, some have a Girsa there was Rav, not Rav Nachman. Over here, some have Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. That's the classic Rav Nachman. So here maybe it's actually Rav Nachman. He says, Mistavra, Commander Amar Malachi ze Ezra. It's logical what we just said. This opinion that said that Malachi was Ezra, it makes sense. Why? Tichsiv in the Vius Malachi, because in the prophecy of Malachi it says, Bagda Yehuda, the people of Yehuda have rebelled, V'toeva nasta b'Yisrael. An abomination has been committed in Israel, of Yerushalayim, and in Jerusalem. Ki chilel Yehuda kodesh Hashem, asher alhav. That because the people of Yehuda, the Holy One of God, who he loved, have been mechalel, they have desecrated. In what way? Uboal bas el nechar. They have been intimate with, married, the daughters of foreign gods. In other words, they have intermarried into other nations. So that was what Malachi testifies about in his nevuah, this terrible rebellious conduct that the people of Yehuda succumbed to. So, now, it says the Gemara, Uman Afrish Nashim Nachrios, who do we know who had a campaign against intermarriage? Ezra. It was Ezra, Dichsiv, as the pasuk says, Vayan Shechania ben Yechiel mibnei Elam. Shechania ben Yechiel from the sons of Elam said, Vayomer Ezra, he said to Ezra, Nachnu ma'alnu be'elokeinu, we have rebelled, desecrated against God, v'noshav nashim nachrios, and we've married foreign women, we've married non-Jewish women. And actually the end of that pasuk says, is there a way to purify it? Is there a mikvah for Yisrael? And is there a way to purify ourselves? And that was a campaign that Ezra took on to purify the intermarriage in Israel. So therefore, amongst the Jews, I mean. So therefore, says Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, it makes sense to suggest that Malachi and Ezra were the same person, because we both find a consistency that they both were tackling the epidemic of intermarriage in their time. Okay. Tana Rabbanan. The rabbis taught in a brisa. Arba nashim yaf yafos hayu ba'olam. There were 4 especially beautiful women who existed. Sarah, Vavigail, Rachav, Esther. Sarah, Abigail, Rachav, and Esther. So I'm switched just so I think so it will be in order. They have Rachav before Abigail, that's just chronological order. Okay, so those were the 4 exceptionally beautiful, more than anywhere else that existed. Ulaman Damar Esther Yerakrokas Haisa. Now, according to the opinion we had in an earlier Gemara, back on Daf Yud Gimel, on page 13a, that Esther was actually not so beautiful. She had a green complexion, an olive complexion, so she shouldn't be on this list. So Mapik Esther Ma'ayo Vashti. So take out Esther and put Vashti, because Vashti was known to be very beautiful. Okay. Tana Rabbanan. The rabbis taught. Rachav bishma zinsa. Rachav was so beautiful that at the mention of her name, one would be tempted to be mizana, to engage in forbidden relations. Yael bikola. Yael from her voice. Abigail bizchirasa. Abigail, if one would remember her or mention her maybe. And Michal Bashal, who wasn't on our previous list, actually neither was Yael, but Michal, the daughter of Shaul, Biriasa, just by seeing her. Just to go back for a second, Yael was the woman who killed Sisera. She was the heroine who killed Sisera, the general of the police in the times of Devorah. And Abigail, we talked about in last week's Amud, eventually became the wife of David HaMelech. Michal was another wife of David, the daughter of Shaul. Okay. Rabbi Yitzchak said, Kola Omer Rachav Rachav Miyad Nikri. Anybody who would say the name of Rachav, would immediately have a seminal emission. Rav Nachman said to him, Ana mina Rachav, I say it, or I said it, Velo Ichbat. It doesn't make a difference to me. So he said back, Hikamina Bioda Umakira. We're talking about someone who knew her, recognized her. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything to you. But somebody who knew her would not be able to withhold the passionate thoughts that would emerge. Now, it's a very strange Gemara that it finds it important to tell us all this. At least with regards to this, I saw one suggestion is that it's bringing out the righteousness of Pinchas and Kalev. Kalev and Pinchas were the spies that the Jews sent forth before they entered the land of Israel, and they spent time with Rachav. They stayed in her. She sheltered them in her home. She was a great tzaddikus. She was very beautiful, but she was a great tzaddikus. And so it's bringing out they resisted any temptation, and by speaking of how beautiful Rachel was, it brings out the righteousness of Kalev and Pinchas, who were the spies. Okay. Okay, now we get back to the Megillah. So following the the decree of Haman and Achashverosh to annihilate the Jews, the pasuk says, "U'Mordechai yadas kol asher na'asa." Mordechai knew all that had occurred, and later in that pasuk it says, "Vayitzak te'aka gedola amara." He cried out a great cry. So ask the Gemara, "Mai Amar?" What did he say when he cried out? So Rav Amar, Rav says, he said the following: Gava libo shel Haman me'Achashverosh. He said Achashverosh's heart has overcome that. Haman's heart has overcome that of Achashverosh. Meaning Haman has overcome Achashverosh and convinced him to do this. That's what he cried out. Shmuel Amar. Shmuel says that he said Gavar Malka Ilah mi Malka Tata, that the higher king has overcome the lower king, which literally would mean Hashem has overcome Achashverosh, but this is euphemistic. He really was saying the opposite. He was saying Hashem, it appears as if the opposite, that the lower king has overcome the higher king. Hashem, has the lower king overcome you? Has Achashverosh overcome you? This was, staring destruction in the face. This was his cry to Hashem. Hashem, it seems as if the lower king, the king in this world, Achashverosh, has overcome you. Okay, now when he sends word to Esther, the pasuk says, "Vatischalchal hamalka me'od," that she became very frightened. She trembled. She became very frightened. Now, ask the Gemara, "My vatischalchal?" What does this word vatischalchal mean? So the Gemara understands that it has to do with the word chalal, which means a hollow, which means she became empty. She became empty. Why does that mean she became empty? So Amarav shapir sanida. She was so frightened that she began to menstruate. She all her inner blood started to come out. For Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar shehutzrachal nikvel. She had a bowel movement. She had to go to the bathroom. That's what she emptied. She was so frightened that that's what happened to her. Okay, either way, it's an expression of just how frightening this was for her. Vatikra Esther Hasach. So what does she do? She called to Hasach. And there's this back and forth between Esther and Mordechai using Hasach as a messenger. So Amarav, Hasach zeh Daniel. Rav says this Hasach was actually Daniel. V'lama nikra shmo Hasach. Why was he called Hasach? Shechatchuhu migdulaso. Because he was cut down. Hasach is like chatach. Hatach is like chatach. He was cut down from his greatness. Meaning, he had previously held very high positions in the courts of the previous kings. First in Belshazzar, the king of Babylonia, and then after he was conquered by the Medians, Daniel held position in the court of Koresh, and then in the court of Dariavish the first. And then when Achashverosh became king, he cut him down. He became, not an advisor anymore. He was still apparently working in the palace and was therefore used as a messenger by Esther, but he was cut down from his great high position. That's what Rav says. Ushmul Amar, Shmuel says, Shekol divrei malchus nechtachin al piv. He was called Hasach, again, which relates to the word chatach, to cut, because all the words of the kingdom were cut by him, meaning they were set, they were processed by him. Okay, so then it says that she commanded him regarding Mordechai, Ladas mazeh ve'al mazeh, to know what this is and on what this is. That's a strange pasuk. What's this repetition? Ladas mazeh ve'al mazeh. What is this and what's it about? Rabbi Yitzchak. So Rabbi Yitzchak says, Shalchalo, what she sent to Mordechai was, I want to understand this. I want to know if this has to do with mazeh and mazeh. Meaning, Shema Avar Yisrael Chamisha Chumshei Torah. Maybe this is because the Jews have transgressed the 5 books of the Torah, which it says with regards to them, Mizeh u'mizehim kesuvim, that they are written on this side and that side, which is a description of the luchos, of the tablets. The way the Maharsha explains it here is because there were 2 tablets, and the commandments are written on both sides. And we know we have this tradition that the 10 Commandments are kind of headings of all the mitzvahs of the Torah. So this was a way of referencing all the mitzvahs of the Torah. Have they transgressed the mizeh mizeh, the two sides of the tablets which account for all the mitzvahs of the Torah? Okay, so Vayagidu Mordechai Esther Esther. So then it says, and they told Mordechai the words of Esther. Now previously Hasach had been going back and forth, and now it says, and they told. Who's they? What happened to Hasach? So the Gemara says he didn't go. Hasach wouldn't go. Mikan. From here we learn Shein Meshivin ala Kalkala. You don't bring back bad news. So what happened was Mordechai had sent to Esther, you gotta intervene. You have to intercede on the behalf of the Jews. She sent back, I can't. If you haven't been called to the king, you can't go to him. So Hasach said, I'm not going to be the bearer of that message, and he wouldn't do it. So others had to bring the message. Now eventually Esther does give in, and she agrees to go, and she gives the following instruction. She says, they go there. She says, go gather all the Jews that are in Shushan, they should fast for me, and they shouldn't eat or drink for 3 days. And I will do the same. And then she says, and then I will come to the king, which is not kadas. It's not customary. And if I'm lost, I'm lost. So that's what she says. I'll come to the king, asher lo kadas, even though it's not customary. And if I'm lost, I'm lost. Says the Gemara, at asher lo kadas, if I read the psukim up until asher lo kadas, Rabbi Abba, shelo kadas, kol yom v'yom. Not like the conduct of all these past days. Meaning, shebechol yom v'yom ad achshav ba'onis. Every day when I was called to the king up till now, it was ba'onis. I was forced to be with him. V'achshav b'ratzon. But now I'm going willingly. In other words, she was going to have to, if she wants something from the king, she's going to have to seduce him. And wrap her request in with, intimate favors. And up till now, she was forced. And that's, justifiable. But now she's going willingly. Again, the circumstances are forcing her, but she's actively going on her own, and she's choosing to go. And so she's now it's willing. Now it's not onus anymore. And the result of that is v'kasher avadti avadti. Again, the simple reading of that pasuk, of that verse, is if I'm lost, I'm lost. If I get sentenced to death, I'll be killed. But the Gemara darshans, the Gemara learns it out that she was saying, Kashem shavatim beis abba, just like I was taken from my parents' house, kach oved mimcha, now I'll be taking from you. Right? She was taking, I guess, from her parents' house as a child, her parents died, and now I'm going to be taken from your house. Right? As we learned, she was married to Mordechai. Now, if a woman commits adultery, she becomes forbidden to her husband. So, up until now, she was forced. So she wasn't forbidden to her husband. But now that she's going willingly, this will make it that she can never be married to Mordechai again. Tosfos asks an interesting question. He says, why didn't they just write a get? Mordechai could have divorced her. She would have gone willingly, but then she wouldn't have been married to him at that time. It wouldn't have been adultery. And then he could, sometime later, remarry her. So Tosfos says, no, because you need to write a get with witnesses, and it would have been too public. They don't want people to know about this. So, okay. Okay, so Mordechai takes her instructions to heart, that he's supposed to gather the Jews and fast, etc. It says, Vayavor Mordechai. And Mordechai passed, and it says, and he did all that she had commanded. So what does it mean when he passed? Where did he pass? Says the Gemara, Amarav Shehevir Yom Rishon Shel Pesach B'Tainis. What it means is he passed through the first day of Pesach fasting. So, because this happened in the days right before Pesach, and so part of the 3 days of fasting would be the first night and the first day of Pesach. Well, I mean, there's a mitzvah d'oraisa, Torah mitzvah tit matzah, but she said you have to fast. So they fasted through Pesach. Shmuel Amar, Shmuel says a different thing. No, Vayavor, again, according to Rav, Vayavor means he transgressed or he passed through those days without eating. Shmuel says it means Da'avar Arkuma Damaya. He crossed over a stream. That's Vayavor Mordechai. What's the significance of that? It's like, okay, he passed over a stream. Rabbi Yonah Eibshit says what it means is he went from the inner city of Shushan, the capital area, the palace area, out, and which was surrounded by a moat of some sort, and he went back out to where the people are, and he went out to the people to inspire them to fast and to pray. Okay, it was on the third day of their preparations, Vatilbash Esther Malchus, and Esther dressed in kingship. So here we have a repeat of the Gemara from the previous page. It says, Big Day Malchus Mibayile. It should have said that she dressed in the clothes, in royal clothes. It says, Vatilbash Esther Malchus, she dressed royal. It should have said she dressed in royal clothes. So what does it mean she dressed royal? Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Melameg, it teaches me Shelavashta Ruach HaKodesh, that she became dressed in Ruach HaKodesh, in the divine spirit. Ksiv Hacha, because it says over here Vatilash, and she dressed. Ksiv Hasmang, it says elsewhere in Divrei Yamim, Beruach Lavsha Es Amasai, that a spirit clothed Amasai. So we see that one can become clothed in a spirit. There is a spirit of strength. Here it's a spirit of prophecy, of Ruach HaKodesh, but that's what it means. And I think, as I mentioned last time, Malchus here could refer to like the sphere of Malchus, which has something to do with Ruach HaKodesh. And so, Batilbash, Esther Malchus, Esther dressed in Malchus means she dressed in Ruach HaKodesh, in divine inspiration, and experienced a level of prophecy. Now, once we quote one thing from Rabbi Elazar in the name of Rabbi Chanina, we go and quote other things that he said in his name as well. So, Amar Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Chanina, Li'olam al tibirkas hedyot kala be'einecha. The blessing of a hedyot, of a simple person, should not be lighting in your eyes. A simple person could give a blessing, and it could be very powerful, meaningful. Sharei shnei gidolei hador baruchum shnei hedyotos. Because there were two people who were gedolei hador, they were the greatest of their generation, and they got blessed by simple people. And the blessings came true. And these are them. David v'Daniel. David and Daniel. David de Barche Aravna. David was blessed by Aravna. And Aravna said to the king, our Gemara doesn't have what he said, but what he said was, Hashem Elokecha Yirtzecha. Hashem should desire you. Hashem should take you in. And that came true. That, I guess, it sounds almost like he was saying, Hashem should forgive you for your past mistakes. And indeed, David later was forgiven. Daniel. Debarche Daryavish. Daniel was blessed by Daryavish. Daryavish was a king, but he was not a tzaddik of any sort. He was not righteous in any way. He wasn't Jewish. This is the first Daryavish. The Chsiv, he says, Elokach di ant polachle, the king, that your God that you serve, b'tzadira, all the time, Hu yishizvinech, he should save you. Okay, and apparently that was a blessing that also came true. That was the blessing Daryavish gave to Daniel. V'amar Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Chanina, and Rabbi Elazar also cited the name of Rabbi Chanina, the other side of the coin. Ati kilas hedyot kal beinecha. Don't let the curse of a simple person be lighting in your eyes. Shari Avimelech kil asar. Because Avimelech cursed Sarah. He said to her, he gave her money, he gave Avram money, and he said it should be kesusainayim, it should cover your eyes. Meaning, like, I guess we should be even, it should cover your eyes, literally. But that was a curse, that your eyes should become covered. She never had her eyes covered, but in the sky in Bizarre, it did happen to her offspring, because what happened was her son, Sarah's son Yitzchak, became blind. Vayiki zakan Yitzchak vatichen einav. When Yitzchak got old, his eyes darkened and he became blind. So the curse of Avimelech, that he said that it should be like your eyes should be covered, happened to Sarah's son Yitzchak. V'amar Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Chanina, and another statement that Rabbi Elazar said in Rabbi Chanina, he said, Borei, come and see Shlok, Midas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Midas Basar V'dam. The attributes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are not like those of flesh and blood. Midas Basar V'dam, when it comes to people, Adam Shofes Kadeir V'achakach Nosing Laso Chamayim. A person first puts the pot on the stove, and then fills it with water. You don't fill it first and then put it on the stove. Okay, nowadays it might be different. You fill it at the sink. Although if you're, some people have a spout now right next to their stove. So they would fit with that Gemara. So if you have the spout next to your stove, you don't fill the pot at the sink. You fill it at the stove. That's what the Gemara describes. That's what people do. First you put it on the stove and then you fill it with water. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he first puts the water, and then he puts the pot on the stove. What does this mean? The fulfillment of that which it says, pasuk in Yirmiyah, it says, L'kol tito hamon mayim bashamayim. So to his voice, by his voice he puts water in the heavens. And then the pasuk is Vayalen Nesi Miktei Haaretz, and clouds come up from the earth to bring rain. So we're saying HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God first fills with water and then puts it in place. So somehow this not so clear to me how he puts the water in the heaven, and then the clouds come up. He's not first putting the pot and then filling it with water. He's first putting the water and then, I guess, moving it out. So he's placing the water in the heavens and then bringing it with the clouds to the earth, something along those lines. Okay. And he also said, Rabbi Elazar also said in the name of Rabbi Chanina, Kala Omer Davar B'Shem Omro, Maybe Geula Le'olam. If a person says something over in the name of the one who said it, they give the credit to the right place, they bring redemption to the world. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Vatomer Esther HaMelech B'Shem Mordechai. So Esther said to the king in the name of Mordechai. In other words, Esther, when she reported the plan of Bigsan and Zeresh to assassinate Achashverosh, she quoted it in the name of Mordechai, and therefore Mordechai was credited with it, and that was a catalyst in the salvation of the Jews, because when later, as Haman is rising to power, he hates Mordechai, so the king realizes that he never rewarded Mordechai, and that episode is a turning point in the story of the Megillah, in terms of Haman's relationship with Achashverosh and Mordechai's relationship with Achashverosh. But it's only because Esther reported the plan of Bigsan and Zeresh in the name of Mordechai. She quoted it B'Shem Omer on the name of the one who said it, and that was a catalyst for redemption. So he says that when somebody does this, they could be a vehicle to bring redemption. V'amar Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Chanina, and Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Chanina, Tzaddik avad l'dara avad. When a tzaddik is lost, when a righteous person is lost, he's lost to his generation, but not to himself. In other words, when a tzaddik passes, so the people of the world have lost something, they've lost a gem, but the tzaddik maintains its status as a tzaddik. He's not lost himself, and he goes on to a tremendous reward. Mashal adam sha'avda lo margalis. It's like a person who loses a gem. Kol makom shehi margalis shma. Wherever it is, it's still called a gem. Lo avda elo lebala. It's only lost to its owner. So too a tzaddik becomes lost to the generation. So it's the generation suffers. They don't have the tzaddik anymore, but the tzaddik is still a tzaddik, meaning it doesn't. That gem is a gem wherever it is, and the next world, the tzaddik gets his or her proper recognition. Okay, we'll continue here next time.